Every morning, humanity wakes up and steps into the light of a nuclear explosion 150 million kilometers away. We call it sunrise, we call it warmth, we call it life. We press our faces toward it through car windows. We plant our gardens in its direction. We build our civilizations around its rise and fall, and we have done so for as long as we have existed as a species. But what we are really doing, what we have always been doing, is standing on the edge of a blast radius, and one day we will not be fast enough to run. Consider what the sun has given us. It accounts for 99.86% of all the mass in our solar system. Every planet, every moon, every comet and asteroid and drifting rock, all of it combined barely registers against the weight of our star. Without it, Earth's surface temperature would plunge toward 270 degrees Celsius within weeks. The oceans would freeze. The atmosphere would collapse into frost. The last light any creature ever saw would be starlight, cold and indifferent. For 3.8 billion years, the sun has sustained life on this planet. It is the engine behind every heartbeat that has ever beaten, every breath, every bloom, every sunrise that has ever made a human being stop and feel for just one moment that existence was worth the trouble. Sunrises and sunsets are the most universal symbol of hope in human history. Every culture, every continent, every century, every single one of them, worshiping the same star. But do not be fooled. The sun is not your friend. It is a 4.6 billion-year-old nuclear reactor burning through 600 million tons of hydrogen every single second. It is a violence of unimaginable scale, held together by nothing but its own gravity. A gravity so immense that it crushes atoms together at its core, releasing energy that will take 100,000 years to reach the surface. And it is already dying. The core of the sun burns at 15 million degrees Celsius. In a single second, it outputs 3.88 10^26 watts of energy, more energy than humanity has produced in its entire history, repeated every second, forever. A stream of charged particles called the solar wind flows outward from the sun at speeds of up to 800 kilometers per second. Right now, as you breathe, it is stripping away the outermost layers of Earth's upper atmosphere. Our magnetic field deflects most of it, but not all. Here's the fact they do not put on motivational posters. The sun has already burned through half its hydrogen fuel. It is middle-aged, and like all middle-aged things, it is changing. Every billion years, the sun grows approximately 10% brighter. It is not dramatic enough to notice in a human lifetime, but on geological timescales, it is a death sentence. In roughly 1 billion years, a number so large it offers false comfort, the increased solar luminosity will begin to boil Earth's oceans, not metaphorically, literally. The water that fills every sea on this planet will evaporate into the atmosphere, creating a runaway greenhouse effect from which there is no return. The clock is already ticking. It has been since the day we were born, but the threat we just described is 1 billion years away. Let us talk about the threat that is not. Solar flares are nuclear explosions on the surface of the sun. When the sun's magnetic field lines twist and snap, a process called magnetic reconnection, they release energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs in a fraction of a second. The resulting burst of radiation and charged particles travels outward at millions of kilometers per hour. Sometimes they are aimed at Earth. On the 1st of September 1859, the largest solar storm in recorded human history made contact with our planet. The Carrington event, named after the British astronomer Richard Carrington, who observed its source flare, was not a subtle thing. Telegraph wires across North America and Europe melted. Sparks leapt from telegraph machines, setting papers on fire. Operators received shocks. Systems that were completely disconnected from power sources began transmitting spontaneously, powered by nothing but the electromagnetic fury of the sun. Auroras, normally confined to polar regions, were visible as far south as Cuba, Colombia, and Hawaii. People woke in the middle of the night thinking it was dawn. That was 1859. Imagine what a Carrington-level event would mean today. Power grids across the planet would collapse within hours. Not days. Hours. Transformers, those hulking pieces of infrastructure that take years to manufacture and cannot simply be replaced overnight, would be destroyed by the millions. Satellites in low Earth orbit would be rendered useless. GPS systems gone. Banking infrastructure offline. The internet dark. no refrigeration, no fuel pumps, no emergency communications, no supply chains. Modern civilization, the entire fragile architecture of the world you know, set back 100 years, overnight, because a star coughed. This is not science fiction. In July 2012, a Carrington-level coronal mass ejection tore through the inner solar system. It missed Earth by 9 days, 9 days earlier in our planet's orbital path. And this conversation might not be happening because the infrastructure to have it would no longer exist. NASA scientists have estimated there is approximately a 12% chance of a major solar event striking Earth in any given decade. 12% per decade. That is not a distant possibility. That is a loaded weapon pointed at civilization, and we have agreed, collectively, to think about it tomorrow. But let us return to the longer arc, the story that ends not in darkness and rebooting, but in fire and erasure. In approximately 5 billion years, the sun will exhaust its hydrogen fuel supply. The nuclear fusion that has sustained it since before the Earth existed will begin to fail. The core will contract under gravity. The outer layers will expand outward in compensation. The sun will become a red giant. It will swell to approximately 200 times its current size. In the inner solar system, this expansion will be catastrophic. Mercury will be swallowed whole. Venus will follow. The sun's outer edge will reach out across the space we now call home. Earth's fate is debated among astrophysicists. Some models suggest Earth will survive the red giant phase, but stripped of its atmosphere, scoured of its oceans, a scorched airless rock baking at over 1,000 degrees Celsius, a tombstone in orbit. Other models suggest the gravitational interaction between the expanding sun and the Earth will cause our planet's orbit to decay, drawing it slowly, inexorably inward, until it is consumed entirely, erased, as though it never existed. But the red giant is not even the beginning of the end. Long before the sun expands, the brightening we described will have already made Earth uninhabitable. In 1 billion years, the oceans boil away. Complex life, every animal, every plant, every ecosystem, dies. In perhaps 2 to 3 billion years, even heat-resistant microbes, the last survivors of everything that ever lived here, perish. And then the red giant. And after the red giant, the sun will shed its outer layers in a cloud of gas and dust called a planetary nebula. What remains will collapse into a white dwarf, an object roughly the size of Earth, but dense beyond imagination, containing the dying embers of our star. It will cool over billions of years, slowly, without light, without warmth, without purpose. In the end, our mother will eat us, not out of malice, simply because that is what stars do. Here is where the story changes. Because for the first time in the 3.8 billion year history of life on this planet, there exists a species that knows what is coming. A species that can read the physics, that can model the evolution of stars, that can look up at the sun and understand, with mathematical precision, exactly how it will end. Carl Sagan said the cosmos is within us, but the cosmos is also what will destroy us. The question is whether we choose to understand it before it does. At NASA and the European Space Agency, scientists are building solar weather prediction systems, the equivalent of meteorological forecasting, but for events that could end civilization. The goal is not to stop a solar flare. No human technology can stop a solar flare. The goal is simply to see it coming, to have 12 hours of warning instead of none. The broader response to the sun's timeline is encoded in every serious discussion about humanity's long-term future. SpaceX, NASA, and a growing constellation of private and national space agencies are developing frameworks for multi-planetary civilization. The reason is simple. A species that lives on only one world, orbiting only one star, is a species one bad day from extinction. And then there is the Parker Solar Probe. Launched in 2018, it is the fastest human-made object ever built, reaching speeds of nearly 700,000 kilometers per hour. It flies closer to the sun than any spacecraft in history. It enters the Coronal, the sun's outer atmosphere, where temperatures exceed 1 million degrees Celsius. Protected by a carbon composite heat shield just 11.4 centimeters thick, it is reaching into the fire to understand it. We sent a machine to touch a star, not to save ourselves, simply because we needed to understand what was coming. Perhaps that is the most human thing we have ever done. Every civilization in history has worshipped the sun. The ancient Egyptians built their entire cosmology around Ra, the sun god, who sailed across the sky each day and battled the forces of darkness each night. The Aztecs fed it human blood, believing it required sacrifice to keep moving. The ancient Greeks called it Helios, driving his chariot of fire. Across 6 continents in 10,000 years, in cultures that never communicated, never traded, never knew the other existed, every one of them looked up, and they all saw the same thing, a god. Perhaps they were right. Not because the sun is conscious, not because it cares, but because all gods, in every tradition, are both creators and destroyers. They give life, and they take it. They do not distinguish between the faithful and the faithless. They simply act according to their nature. The sun made us. The sun will unmake us. In 5 billion years, there will be no sunrises. The sky that has turned pink and gold every morning for billions of years will go dark. The warmth that has pressed against the faces of every living thing that has ever existed on this planet will end. There will be no earth to receive it, no atmosphere to scatter it into colors, no eyes to see it. Just a white dwarf, slowly cooling in an endless dark, carrying no memory of the billions of lives that once circled it in wonder, carrying no record of the songs, the paintings, the wars, the love, the grief, the billion quiet mornings when someone stepped outside and felt the warmth on their face and thought, for just one moment, that everything was going to be all right. So step outside tonight. Look up at the sky. Feel the last warmth of a dying star on your face. And remember, every sunrise you have ever seen is one fewer that remains.